I had always loved driving at night. The cool breeze through the windows, the quiet of the empty roads, and the way the world seemed to shrink to just me and the car. But that night, something was different. Something was off. I had left work late, exhausted from the day's meetings and looking forward to the weekend. The highway was nearly deserted, the streetlights casting eerie, elongated shadows on the asphalt. My route home took me through a stretch of countryside, a long and winding road flanked by dense woods on either side. As I drove, my headlights sliced through the darkness, revealing glimpses of the trees and the occasional reflective eyes of nocturnal animals. The hum of the engine was comforting, a steady companion in the night. I turned up the radio, trying to keep myself awake with some late-night talk show, the voices indistinct but familiar. About 20 minutes into the drive, I noticed the first sign of trouble. My dashboard flickered, the lights dimming momentarily before returning to normal. I frowned, tapping the gauges, but everything seemed fine. I shrugged it off, attributing it to a momentary glitch. A few miles later, the radio cut out, replaced by static. I fiddled with the dial, but it refused to tune into any station. Annoyed, I turned it off, opting for silence over the grating noise. That's when I saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road, barely visible in the periphery of my headlights. I slowed down, my heart rate quickening. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, his face obscured by the brim of a hat. He raised his hand, not in a wave, but in a strange, almost robotic gesture. I rolled down my window slightly as I pulled up next to him. "Do you need help?" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the night air. He didn't respond, just kept standing there, his hand still raised. Something about his stillness unnerved me. I felt a chill run down my spine, and an instinctual urge to get away. I rolled up the window and pressed the gas pedal, leaving the figure behind. As I continued driving, I couldn't shake the image of the man from my mind. My pulse was racing, and I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him standing in the middle of the road, but it was empty. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was probably just some eccentric local, I reasoned. Nothing to worry about. The road grew narrower, the trees on either side seeming to close in. The moonlight barely penetrated the canopy, casting an almost oppressive darkness. Suddenly, the car began to shudder. The engine sputtered, and despite my foot pressing down on the accelerator, the car slowed to a crawl. My heart pounded as I steered it to the side of the road, the engine finally dying with a pathetic whimper. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. I reached for my phone, but of course, there was no signal. I cursed under my breath, glancing around at the surrounding darkness. I had no choice. I needed to find help. Grabbing a flashlight from the glove compartment, I stepped out of the car, the night air chilling me to the bone. The forest was eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath my feet as I started walking. After what felt like an eternity, I saw a faint light in the distance. Relief washed over me as I hurried towards it, my flashlight bobbing in my hand. It was a house, old and decrepit, but with a warm glow emanating from the windows. I knocked on the door, the sound echoing through the night. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with a kind, if somewhat wary, expression. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in my appearance. "I'm sorry to bother you," I began, but my car broke down a little ways back. "I was wondering if I could use your phone to call for help." She hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The interior of the house was cozy but cluttered, filled with antique furniture and knick-knacks. She led me to an old rotary phone in the hallway. I picked up the receiver, but there was no dial tone. I jiggled the cradle, but nothing. The woman watched me, her expression unreadable. "It's been out for a few days," she said softly. "Storm knocked out the lines." I sighed, thanking her anyway. As I turned to leave, she grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Stay the night," she insisted. "It's not safe out there." I wanted to refuse, to get back to my car and try to find another way, but something in her eyes made me pause. There was a deep-seated fear there, a warning. I nodded reluctantly, allowing her to lead me to a small guest room. The bed was old but comfortable, and despite my anxiety, exhaustion soon overtook me. I drifted off to sleep, the events of the night fading into a strange, uneasy dream. I awoke to a sound, a soft, shuffling noise outside the window. My heart leapt into my throat as I sat up, straining to hear. The noise grew louder, closer. I crept to the window, peering out into the darkness. There, standing just outside the pool of light from the house, was the man from the road. His face was still hidden, but I could feel his eyes on me. He raised his hand again, that same unnatural gesture, and took a step forward. I stumbled back, panic flooding my senses. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my flashlight and darted out of the room, heading for the front door. The old woman was nowhere to be seen. I flung the door open and ran into the night, the man's figure growing closer with each passing second. I sprinted towards my car, the flashlight beam dancing wildly. My breath came in ragged gasps as I reached the vehicle, fumbling with the door handle. It was unlocked. I threw myself inside, locking the doors behind me. The man was standing at the edge of the woods, his hand still raised. I frantically tried the ignition, but the car remained lifeless. Tears of frustration and fear blurred my vision as I glanced back at the figure. He was gone. I didn't wait to find out where he went. I grabbed my phone, praying for a signal. To my astonishment, a single bar appeared. With trembling hands, I dialed 911, my voice barely coherent as I explained my situation. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, and I stayed on the line, my eyes darting around the darkness. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, the flashing lights of a police car pierced the night. An officer approached, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. I stumbled out of the car, babbling my story. He listened, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. "You're lucky," he said finally. "This road has a history. People see things, strange things. Some say it's haunted." I shivered, glancing back at the woods. The figure was gone, but the memory lingered, a shadow on my mind. As the officer escorted me to his car, I cast one last look at the dark, winding road. I never drove that way again.